Hello all and welcome to episode 78 of the 3 for 1 Sky Fantasy Podcast by fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, with some players coming to the fore over the weekend. Firstly, I must apologise to everyone watching live, as Dan Cox just suggested in the chat. Paul and I have been chatting some amazing Sky and general fantasy football content over the last 7 minutes without me pressing the go live button. So let's start again. Paul, I gave you a bit of, it was a really good intro, I thought, last time. A really good ribbing around Matt Doherty and his incredible performances for Spurs. Firstly, what do you think of Matt Doherty?
Just like Groundhog Day, where you're trying to get me angry over and over again. We had the chat. We had the chat pre what we thought we were going live. Then we had the chat when we thought we were live, and now you're trying to do it a third time to me.
Oh, sorry, Paul. It's the third time I've had to mention Matt Doherty. I really apologise.
I'm not considering him, and I only know he's 7.6 million because you questioned the fact that I wouldn't know how much he was because I refused to look at him on my screen. So.
Oh, one absolute plum. I do apologise. We're gonna have to try and redo the content we just did because it was a really good chat actually. But firstly, Paul, how was your Sky weekend?
Yeah, it was okay. Thanks. I'm still around. I think I'm 41st. So you've only had to change the second digit on my rank for the last 4 or 5 weeks when I've been on the pod. A couple of moves I made. So 2 transfers down, and I'm willing to admit that you were right on the Gabriel situation, and
That's being clipped, mate. That's being clipped.
I think I've made a mistake by bringing him in, but his averages were good over that time period I was looking at, and I probably should have spent a bit more time looking at the detail of it. So I think it's highly inflated by his attacking output, which obviously isn't a consistent factor. So it's not the kind of move that I generally make. So he does have fixture volume coming up. So and Arsenal's fixtures are good till the end of the season. So I don't necessarily think I need to try and rectify what I still think is a mistake immediately. But
no, it's not a horrendous mistake, is it? It's just you've probably gone into it and and maybe you wouldn't have done it. But who knows? As you say, they got the fixture volume. All he needs, is a couple of clean sheets, pass a bonus, maybe a goal. You say it's inflated his stats, which it has, but he's clearly got attacking threat. It's probably not an optimal move you would have liked to make, but out of your 40 moves of the season, mate, if you make, I think we probably all allow ourselves, kind of 10 to 15% of those transfers are going to be ones which you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So. Yeah. Put in that camp.
It's definitely not the worst. It's definitely not the worst. Not the worst move I've ever made. So
it's not. But knowing your attitude towards how precious transfers are and stuff, I'm exactly the same. Yeah. So your rank is not really moving at the moment, Paul. Hoping for a last gasp kind of lunge at the end for you. I had a really good weekend actually. I made a couple of transfers. So I got it from I think I was about 240. Last week. I'm 162nd now. Although I would say I was 159th last night. Captained Kane. Went back in to look, very excited to see if I'd managed to jump up, anywhere towards the top 100. And I had dropped rank, which I still don't understand. The only obvious conclusion is that lots of people were doubled up. But that seems a lot for and my BT, which was in the early 200s, rose to 196. So it's either incredibly congested around my area or a lot of people are doubled up. Have you got any thoughts on that, Paul? It's a very strange one.
Yeah, I think it goes down to coincidence that around your rank that people are doubling up and it's concentrated there. I think that's the only fair explanation, because if you look at the percentage ownership this morning, you can't think that there's too many people on the double up. Maybe there's a handful of people with Kulusevski as well making up that. But again, he doesn't appear on the leaderboard for the top 1k ownership either. So I think it'll probably just be to do with the congestion around there and perhaps the concentration of those with double are hovering coincidentally around the 100 to 200 position overall rank.
Yeah, I made a couple of transfers over the weekend. So because Bowen was injured, and I was considering taking him out anyway for a Chelsea defender on Thursday. I had a quick look at my team, and those I thought were dispensable, and obviously Bowen is dispensable now. I think there's been a lot of talk about moving him on regardless because of West Ham's form and lack of immediate fixtures. Gallagher is kind of the same. He's ticking along, but they're probably better options, especially in the short to medium term at the moment. And Laporte is one I've held on. He's really good, but Chelsea just have that fixture. They got Norwich and Newcastle, I think, haven't they, coming up, and they just looked fantastic as well, didn't they? So I moved on Bowen to Saka, which was obviously a brilliant move, and thanks to you, Paul, because you definitely inspired that move. And I also did Pope to Ramsdale early, and the reason I had to do that was because I needed that 0.1, I think it was, to be able to complete my Gallagher and Laporte move to Rudiger and Thiago Silva on Thursday. So only 4 points off Ramsdale, but obviously 14 off Saka. I had 16 off Coutinho. Kane cap, kind of nailed the big caps as well. So a really good week for me. And but I'm using a few transfers, but then I've gone from 16 down to 14. I'm using 2 more on Thursday to take me down to 12. But I do think it's worth it, because I do think we're hitting a point of the season now where we're going to start slowly transitioning into the team that is going to be our team at the end. And I think all those moves, especially the Chelsea defenders, probably maybe Saka, maybe Ramsdale, are players we're going to have kind of at the end, long term. So yeah, I'm not keen on making many short term transfers for 3 funds at the moment, unless it maybe involves a captaincy, unless they're going to be really highly owned. Definitely looking at the kind of longer term now. So
yeah, I think that I had contemplated the Pope to Ramsdale move as well, and I still might, or I'm still likely to make it this weekend coming. I was looking at it from my own perspective, and it was Ramsdale versus Watford or Pope versus Brentford, because they'd have the same volume of fixtures before I'd want to make the move next Sunday anyway. It makes more sense from your perspective to move early, knowing that you needed that 0.1 to do your future plan transfers. Hence why Ian Parron's transfer planner's an exceptional tool to allow you to plan those future moves. But yeah, I just held off, and I think it's much of a muchness. Ramsdale's 4, will Pope score 4 or more, even if he scored 2 or 3 for the additional information that I'm getting, and perhaps plans change as we well know as well. So I wasn't too disappointed in not making that move early.
I almost like being forced into moves at times, because it helps push you over the edge on a 50-50. Sometimes you need that.
Exactly. It takes away the 50-50 decisions, you're right.
It does. Some interesting comments in the chat just around Spurs. Tom Hartnell says Kulusevski is 8.9%, which is quite high actually. So 89 managers in the top 1,000. And AD Tour said Spurs had a 7-3 over City. So some people moved on a City asset. And he said personally he brought in Lloris for De Gea. So yeah, so that's a really good shout there as well, and well played anyone who did that, because they definitely got fixture volume, and they hopefully are now a team in form, even though they tend to have one great result followed by one really bad result. But they did it be good. I think we touched on it last week, didn't we, around Spurs, the congestion of fixtures. So great stuff there. For any new watchers and listeners, you are very, very welcome. If you haven't subscribed yet, please press the subscribe button at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and set the alerts so you don't miss our podcasts and live streams. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. So today, we're going to take a look at the shifts that are being made in key player and team ownership before looking at how the total remaining fixtures for individual teams could affect the transfers we make in the coming couple of weeks. We will answer plenty of Twitter questions and take a look at the updated mini leagues. So firstly, Paul, from ffstuff.co.uk, we have the top 1k ownership. Salah still riding high, 98.4%. Cancelo 96.6%. Kane went up last night, 87.3%, and Kilman 73%. He's really high. Trent 71%. What are your observations of the ownership shifts this week?
Yes. So the biggest movers, I think, Conor Gallagher down to 49%, Jared Bowen down to 47%. So a lot of Sky managers moving those assets on, either trying to fit in a Chelsea defender if formation allowed. So you can see that Rudiger's up to 32%. I think he'll be, like I predicted last week, I think he'll be up to like 70-75% on Friday morning after Thursday's games. He offers a good captaincy there, and offers a good captaincy on Sunday as well. Rafinha's dropped down to 44.8% as well. Aaron Ramsdale up to 37%, and because Pope's down to 31%, it was almost like the two of it inversed one another. Like you could tell that it's the majority moves from Pope directly to Ramsdale there. And the other kind of two players that stand out is Saka and Gabriel. So both on Sunday took a massive increase. So Saka was at 3.9%, moved up to 29.5%.
It's massive.
I was expecting a big rise, but the Bowen news hadn't come out yet to the extent of his injury. I know that you had kind of alluded to it there, that he'll potentially miss this weekend's game, but then will likely be back for future games after that. But because that wasn't known at the time, and a lot of people were constrained by the formation that they were playing, perhaps in a 5-3-2, and therefore had to pick a midfielder up. It made sense with the volume of games to pick up Saka, or to pick up Kulusevski on last night as well. Might have been a popular move, moving out Bowen or Gallagher there as well. And then Gabriel's moved up, roughly 10% up to 19.3% as well.
Yeah, we can definitely see this shift, as we're saying, to the teams who finish the season strongly, who've got the most fixtures and, fixture volume and quality, and teams in form as well. Because in all fairness, Chelsea, Arsenal are playing incredibly well. Even though Arsenal defensively, they're not keeping a lot of clean sheets at the moment, are they? And Spurs are obviously very up and down, but do have one of the highest amount of fixtures going to the end of the season. We can definitely see this shift to where it's going. I expect Leicester players to join that in the next couple of weeks as well. Got graphic up now, Paul, showing Chelsea's effective ownership of their whole team. What did you want to touch on here?
Yeah, so there was a question came in about, I can't remember verbatim what it said. Maybe you'll remind me at the end, Fergi, but it was about how many Chelsea defenders do you need to make gains, or to level out. So you can see just now that the overall defensive effective ownership is only 40%, or sorry, it's roughly 50% if you add up the tail of like James and Mendy as well. So 50%. So only 1 in 2 managers on average have a Chelsea player in the top 1,000. Now I expect that to grow significantly on Thursday, with Rudiger and Silva in particular picking up, but not to the point where I think it'll exceed 200% effective ownership. So I think 2 is probably the right answer in terms of level pegging, or perhaps making a slight bit of ground up. If you sit with 1 and Chelsea keep a clean sheet, unless you have other assets on that date, then you could expect to drop in rank a little bit as well. I think 2 is sensible. Here's one for you, Fergie. I don't know. I know you've talked about bringing in Thiago Silva and Rudiger. Do you know what the points difference is between those 2 players this season?
Only because it's up on the screen in front of me on the slide. It's 5 points.
Yeah, 5 points. 154 points to
an animal
to rotation risk. Thiago Silva.
He's good for a goal though as well. He scored a few goals
against Stoll. Well, so is Rudiger. Rudiger scored a few as well. Like rotation risk, Thiago Silva 154 points, 8.6 million against Rudiger. Yeah. Stalwart, plays every game. I'm going on the narrative as opposed to what the actual output is as well. So even if I don't like making multiple moves to get my end objective. So if it was, I really want to get Rudiger in and I need to make 2 or 3 moves to get Rudiger, but I could afford Thiago Silva with 1 move, I wouldn't hesitate in just bringing in Thiago Silva and not having Rudiger if I was disrupting the whole balance of my team to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a good shout. I'm sure I saw something last week to say that Thiago Silva has played, I think he's played, I hope it's Silva they were talking about now, but I think he's played every game he's been fit for since like game week 3 or something. So you know, as you say, rotation risk. He's just not there. He's you know, or it hasn't been there this season, and I think it's a really good point. And he's so dangerous. You know, I know that Rudiger has scored a couple as well, but Silva scores a lot of goals, nailed for passing. He's probably more nailed than Rudiger for passing, I would guess. I don't know, but he you know, he sits in the middle, don't he, of the three, and just kind of spreads it both ways.
If you weren't playing an ownership style strategy like I play, I would argue that Silva has a higher ceiling than Rudiger, and therefore is a better captaincy option if you owned them both, or were to only own one as well.
Yeah, I can't disagree. As you say, the narrative of him being rested is nerve wracking when you don't see the lineups. But obviously on Thursday, for example, we will see the lineups. So yeah, it's interesting actually. Too. Right, okay, so it's interesting. If you think if you are bringing them both in, Silva potentially is a better captaincy option than Rudiger. It's a good shout. Yeah. What about the others? Obviously, Reece James, had an absolute stormer on the weekend. He scored 125 points a season, still only 4% owned as it stands at the moment. Obviously, he's not going to get goals and assists every week. What are your thoughts on him? 8.9 million.
I think if you've got a lot of transfers, and I definitely wouldn't steer away from, if you move to a 5-3-2 formation and you had a lot of transfers, I'd be targeting Silva before I'd be targeting James. Again, my management style, I just like the floor of points, which contradicts my Gabriel pick. But yeah.
It's interesting. It's finding room as well, isn't it? Because a lot of us obviously got Cancelo. A lot of us have either got maybe Laporte or Van Dijk. A lot of us got.
We were talking about.
A lot of us got Trent.
We were talking about Trent last week, and I know people were getting itchy fingers because Van Dijk and Matip was well outscoring them to that point. But we felt there was. It's great to say in hindsight, but we felt that there was a haul just around the corner from Trent because he's so consistent that he doesn't go through bad patches for too long without getting some sort of attacking returns.
And obviously, 73% of the top 1K have also got Kilman as well, and Wolves got a lot of fixtures coming up. Maybe hint maybe that, he may, lose his place or be rested soon, but 6.2 million is hard to get everyone in. Obviously, we talked about Saka and Kulusevski and all these players. Unless you've got like Ramsey and Broja or something, it's really, really tough to find the balance to have in all these wonderful players. It's good. It's good as it is interesting for the game.
Yeah, Broja's kind of restricting those that have went with him a bit on the formation. Everyone's looking to pile into Chelsea, but you can't get into that 5-3-2 while keeping Kane and Salah.
Yeah, I know we had a conversation, didn't we, that week around who we were going for, kind of offline when we were, on the day, and we both went for Ward-Prowse. I think we both wanted Broja, but obviously Ward-Prowse was the route to the 5-3-2, wasn't it? So
that's exactly right.
Yeah. And just on the Arsenal team as well, Ramsey, as you said, 37%.
Yeah. Covered a lot of this off in that in the ownership stats and the changes there as well. I guess another player I'm highlighting him, but probably wouldn't go and pick him is Odegaard. So he's picking up bonus quite regularly recently. He's only owned by 5 managers in the top 1,000, and he offers an alternative. But with Saka only being 0.2 million more expensive, I think he's the standout choice there for me.
132 points for Saka. That is an incredible return, isn't it? When you consider, a mid-price midfielder is in there, in the same conversation in terms of points as some of these, nailed on centre backs for passing and stuff. It's incredible performance, and he looks on fire. I've got to be honest. He's not normally the kind of player I would pick in Sky. I'd pick him for like FPL maybe and some other teams, but for consistent flow of points, you tend to want a little bit more to his game, don't you, in terms of passes or tackling maybe, but he just looks unbelievable, and he looks like he could be man of the match in every game, doesn't he, at the moment?
Yeah, he does fit into that 2-2-2-10 type.
Yeah.
Like he'll go for a dry patch and then he'll hit a couple of big figures. But I just think the volume, you were buying so many tickets to win the lottery by doing it. They've got a nice run of fixtures. And he is someone that you could potentially hold all the way through to the end of the season. Arsenal's fixtures are really good. They've got extra games to get fit in there as well. So, I think it was definitely a good option. And still is a good option if it's not too late to bring him in. I don't think you could move off a player that plays on Saturday and get an extra game on the Sunday for Arsenal. Then they have the Thursday game, and then they play in the FA Cup weekend round the fixtures as well.
Yeah, I agree. He's kind of like he's got that like the talismanic sort of feel to him at the moment, similar to we say that with Villa and Coutinho obviously did incredibly well against Man United. Then he's blanked a couple, but he's capable of putting in these massive performances, and he's so talismanic when he plays well. He's practically guaranteed man of the match, isn't he? So I've got an interesting debate in my team because I've got Coutinho in my one team and I've got Ramsey in the other team, and obviously they're slipping and sliding because obviously the Ramsey team I'll likely put an extra Chelsea defender in that team. It's a really good experiment. I'm quite enjoying it because I can't afford probably to have an extra defender in my A team because I've got Coutinho, but I can with Ramsey, and I'm kind of experimenting of which works out better, the budget enabler and then the premium block, or the other way around. It's good. Anyway, sorry, I'm prattling on now. We've now got a list of fixtures in terms of fixture blocks left for the for the remainder of the season. Paul, do you want to talk us through what this means?
Yeah, so you and I share a similar thought about like what the benchmark is for transfer usage, and we always say remaining games left. If you've got a transfer per remaining round the fixtures, then that feels about right. We know that on the last update from Sky Sports that the remaining transfers were 11 average for top 10, 14 for top 100, 14.4 for top 1,000, 12.2 for top 5,000. And I think based on the changes that we've seen, the Pope to Ramsdale move, the Saka increase, the Gabriel increase, the Rudiger increase, the anticipated increase furthermore of Chelsea assets this week, perhaps again even Coutinho and moving off Bowen and Gallagher, that those transfer figures will take a big dent. And I was thinking I knew that you had made 2 moves and we're planning another 2 moves as well. So it was a good example of where are you going to fit into the averages. So looking from today onwards, I've got a list here. So Arsenal, Everton, Leicester have all got the most games with 13 left to go. Brentford, Crystal Palace, Man City and West Ham have the least at 10. That averages out at the 11.3 games per team. So if you're sitting 11-ish, so somewhere kind of between 10 and 13, 14, then that feels about right in terms of opportunities and not running out of transfers before the end of the season. I specifically seen Tom Hartnell's plan around in question related to moves that he was planning. So I've put in a specific date to him for 18th of March. So you can see the volume of games that each team has to play from then. The average is 9.6. And I think on Tom's question, he was asking whether it was too much that he'd only have 10 left. So he's going to have more transfers left based on his current plan of what the average remaining games are left. So I think that's absolutely fine. And then the last date that I put in was just when all the fixtures are done before the international break. And that leaves on average 9.2 games per team. So again, if you're hovering around the kind of 10 plus transfers position, I think that's adequate. Obviously, if you're looking to make gains and climb the table as everybody is towards the end of the season, then having a few more than that would be handy. But if you're trying to consolidate and you're happy with your current position or fend off, then having the average or a little bit, or even just a little bit more, I think is satisfactory.
That's awesome analysis, Paul. And I also noticed a different slant on this as well, because it does remind you around fixture congestion for certain teams and daisy chaining. So for me, a really good example is looking at Spurs. Right, we're not going to get rid of Kane, as an example, right? Because he's at the moment he's absolutely on fire. He's going to score loads of goals the rest of the season the way he's playing. But Spurs at the moment have got the second highest amount of games left to play as it stands now with 12. By the time we come out of the international break, he will have one of the joint lowest amount of games left to play due to the congestion. So I'm not talking about Kane specifically, but maybe those who have brought in Lloris or Kulusevski or someone along those lines to maximise the current fixture volume may look to daisy chain off those to maybe players from if we look at the list, the teams that are going to have the most matches left after the break. There's some like Burnley, for example. Okay, maybe Pope, but other than that, maybe wouldn't be that bothered for Everton unless it was for captaincy. But Arsenal will have 10, Chelsea will have 10, and Leicester will have 11, which is the joint most with Everton and Burnley. And this is what I mean about that transition of the team and why daisy chaining is so important, because Lloris, for example, now looks a really good pick for the next few weeks. Potentially not the best pick from after the break onwards, and I looked at that slant on the obviously what you said was absolutely fantastic and and really really valuable and good, but I think there's multiple ways of looking at this data and kind of informing you on what kind of transfers you want to look at going forward.
Yeah, even the Pope. I'd mentioned in my previous pod about goalkeeper transfers. I think are underrated, and even Pope to Ramsdale and then back to Pope when. Yeah. When their volume picks up, I don't think's the worst. I don't think's the worst use of transfers necessarily. It all depends on how the fixtures lie, obviously, in single game days and again congestion in those smaller periods. But I definitely wouldn't rule that move out myself.
Yeah, looking at you did a bit of analysis, didn't you, a few weeks back at the points per million per match, and it was jammed with keepers, wasn't it? Keepers are really good value in this game, yeah. And how many times have we made a crappy transfer to someone like, I don't know, Lacazette or Damari Gray or someone like that, whereas a real positive
Patrick Van Aanholt.
Whereas a really positive move from Ramsdale to Pope for a 4-for-1, for example, could actually pay you back in spades, couldn't it?
Yep.
As he did for as he's done for captains a few times. Even last week they conceded on the Tuesday. He still got a 7 or 8 pointer, didn't he? He's
picked up man of the match.
Got man of the match, indeed. Yeah, but no, fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much for that. Let's just have a walkthrough of the fixtures for the next week or two. Then, so we've got the games on Thursday, Norwich and Chelsea, when we do expect a massive influx of Chelsea ownership, especially of Rudiger, and potentially for Silva, maybe James, maybe Mendy as well. Just on Chelsea, Paul, all the midfielders and forwards are very, very low owned. No, they're probably a lot of risk. I have mentioned. I really like the looks of Kovacic and Kovacic and Jorginho. I know they're potentially seen as boring picks, but what they were producing the first half of the season was really, really good. Are they interested in you now at all, or do you just think there's so many other options, you don't need them?
Yeah, they're not interested in me. I think I will be looking to move to a 5-3-2 formation where I've got and I mean transition to this over the next 3 or 4 game weeks where I've got 5 solid defenders with a high base, which will probably mean getting rid of Gabriel and getting rid of Kilman at some point to have a back line that includes 1 or 2 Chelsea, 1 or 2 City, 1 or 2 Liverpool, and having that basis, and therefore having to save a little bit in midfield, maybe having like Ramsey as my enabler in there. To line up with maybe your Gallagher, Bowen, Coutinho, Saka, like two players of that ilk. And I just don't think that I'm going to use a transfer to one of those Chelsea assets because my plans are moving them or using them more in defensive assets.
Okay. Southampton play Newcastle. Wolves play Watford. Kilman might get something in this game if he plays. we're hoping. And Leeds against Villa, which could be any score, couldn't it? Right, the way those two teams are playing at the moment. It's a lot of popular options there. In terms of captaincy, I think it's quite a tough one. Would you just bank on a starting Chelsea defender?
Yeah, you say it's difficult. For me, I think for me it's straightforward. I think
Rudiger.
I think Rudiger will be by far the most captained player. He's the one that's guaranteed the points. Yeah, you've got the explosiveness of a Rafinha who's done well to dodge points recently, and you've got Coutinho who's in form against a leaky Leeds. But I think it's for me anyway. It would be relatively straightforward and from my captaincy pick.
Okay, cool. We then go on to next game week. Brighton against Liverpool. We see the lineups for that game. Brentford against Burnley, and Man United against Spurs. I think the default go-to will be Salah. Brighton have just seemed to have dropped off a cliff at the moment, haven't they, defensively?
Yeah, I think if Brighton had been posting better defensive numbers, there possibly could have been an argument for Kane.
Absolutely.
He seems to perform well in these types of games. But then if Spurs just had a good performance, is this not them do a bad one based on the way that they're yo-yoing from good performance to bad performance? I know that's coincidence and it's not, and there's nothing to be taken from that pattern, I don't think. But yeah, based on how bad Brighton are defensively just now, I think that Salah would be my default.
I just think with Spurs, it's who they play against. It's when they play against when they're allowed to break. Like Man City allowed them to break. Everton last night, I don't know if you watched the game, where like the Everton defence were just nowhere to be seen. They just kept ripping them. They had so many 4-on-3s and 3-on-2s, like all game. I just can't for the life of me understand what they were trying to do. And United, I think, are going to be similar. There's no way that Man United are going to play a low block, at home against Spurs. They're going to go for it, and Kane is going to be up against Harry Maguire. I mean, I think he's going to feast. I honestly do. I don't know if Spurs are going to win. I think because Spurs defensively are definitely up and down, but I feel it could be, a reasonably high-scoring game. Like a 3-2 or a 3-1 to Spurs or something. But yeah,
there's definitely an argument. Yeah, there's definitely an argument for captain Kane. I'll be captain of Salah. But
a couple of interesting observations from John L. He says, surely Pope has to come back in at Easter. I like that. So there was a bit of chat there, around when to bring back Pope. And he also says, when Webster hasn't played for Brighton, they have only won 1 out of 11 matches. If that is true, it's a very, very interesting observation there. On to Sunday, West Ham against Villa, Southampton, Watford. There's 5 2 p.m. games. Blimey, West Ham. It's like Saturday afternoon. West Ham, Villa, Southampton, Watford, Leeds, Norwich, Everton, Wolves, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Arsenal versus Leicester. What's your money on for captaincy on this day, Paul?
I think there's an argument again for Rudiger, but I certainly wouldn't opt against Rafinha at home to Norwich. It's a good fixture for him. He's still 47% owned. I think it would be one of those two options for me. If Bowen was fit, and maybe his form has dipped slightly recently, if Bowen was fit and maybe he kept up his form a little bit, then there could have been a suggestion to captain him against Villa. But I think that the Chelsea defender or Rafinha at home to Norwich are the two standout options for me. I guess the beauty is that you might see some more transfers because you're getting 5 lineups. So if somebody was dropped unexpectedly, then people might get trigger happy and make a move or two.
And on Monday, Palace against Man City. Interesting one because Palace have played well recently, haven't they, against City? We all remember Andros Townsend's Thunderbolt a couple of seasons ago. I'm sure they had a good result.
Beat them 2-0. They beat them 2-0 this season as well. Laporte got sent off.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. So this is part of the reason why I think I'm getting rid of Laporte, because I think it's going to be a tough game for Man City, whereas I think the Chelsea games are better. It's just going to be a Cancelo captaincy, he's going to be incredibly highly captained in this match, isn't he? Those who don't. So interestingly, I'm getting rid of Gallagher and Laporte as my two moves. So I'm hoping Cancelo plays, because if he doesn't, I won't have a captain, which will be interesting. I guess a lot of people might be in the same boat, Paul. What would your advice be there if Cancelo doesn't start?
I probably wouldn't make a move if you only owned Cancelo and he didn't start. And the safety blanket is that it's a Monday game, so City don't play midweek, and then they don't play at the weekend, so the rest period around that game is quite high, and they need to win because Liverpool's pretty close to them in the league now. They need to win, so I'm less nervous. I'm never really nervous about him not playing anyway, because he plays, like 95% of games. But the fact that when you take those elements in as well, I'd be even less nervous than the fractional nervousness that I usually have. I
think there's also an element as well, is that it's quite a tough game to call. It's not like they play in Norwich, right? When you need, you're missing out on a 20-pointer, say, is against Pat. I think that's a really tough game to call regardless. So yeah, I agree. I'd probably skip. Tom Hartnell mentions John Stones, who could be an interesting pick for the next few weeks. Good for passing and stuff. It's just hard to go for him. I think he's probably
if they had the volume of
volume.
If they had the volume of games in the short term, I definitely would. Even though it meant a transfer down the line, I still think that might be more viable than.
Agree, yeah, but because they're in the FA Cup, they don't have a game the week after. Because they're in the FA Cup, do they?
They've only got one game. Yeah, they've only got one game until the international break from now onwards.
Exactly, and and Diaz after the break. So if he was up for 6 weeks, he would already have missed a week here, missed another week, 2 weeks break. He'll be back 2 weeks after the break anyway, wouldn't he? If the 6 weeks is to be believed anyway, so he's definitely a transfer back.
And the second game back for City is against Liverpool as well.
Good shout. Yeah, I think I'll leave there. Yeah, really good stuff there, Paul. And just finally, just to touch on next week's midweek's fixtures. Brighton have got Spurs, Arsenal, Liverpool. That's going to be easy when there's going to be plenty of captaincy opportunity there. We'll touch on this more next week when we know more. And Thursday the 17th, don't want to go into it in depth yet because we will be talking about this next week definitely. But Everton versus Newcastle, Paul, is it's a tough one at the moment because Everton look awful. Newcastle actually look pretty decent. And I think when we looked at this a few weeks ago, it would have been, we need an Everton player. I think there's an argument now, if you're going to go for everyone, maybe go for a Newcastle player. Have you got any kind of immediate thoughts on this?
So, a couple of weeks after the international break now, I don't like planning transfers this far in advance, especially this season. But a couple of weeks after international break, on a Friday night, Wolves play Newcastle as well. So, if you don't already own Kilman, I think there's a good argument to move someone like Gallagher onto Willock or onto Ryan Fraser just now. You would get the Thursday game this week. I think they play Chelsea then, which I know is not a great fixture. You pick up the captaincy against Everton a couple of games back, and then the captaincy against Wolves. And then you could and then move them on. Whereas if you already own Kilman, it's maybe not as appealing. If Kilman doesn't get dropped, as some are anticipating this week, because you'd have that Wolves Newcastle captaincy already covered. It's just something else to think about. If you don't already have Kilman, I think that's a viable option to daisy chain down.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Note some went for the keeper, Dubravka, as well. Obviously down to fixture volume and this game as well. Looks like Tom has done it in the chat. Dubravka baby, bigging him up. But yeah, we'll touch on that more probably next week. Because it's I think for me, I understand your Fraser point, and I do, and I think it's a really good point. So if Kilman doesn't start on Thursday, for example, you get the extra game there, don't you? But to me, this smacks of one of those non-essential see the lineup ones if you're going to make a move personally. I think it's one of those, because you'd be gutted if you brought in Fraser and then he had a rest next Thursday, wouldn't you? I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had loads and loads of questions, so let's have a cut. We've probably answered quite a lot of them, actually, so I'll try and look for the ones that we haven't mentioned. Daniel Radcliffe is worried about Thiago Silva. Chelsea in no man's land. He's old. He's not that old. I'm older than him. He surely gets rested moving forward. I think we answered that earlier. I think there's nothing to suggest that he's not going to carry on. And they've actually got a lot of injuries, haven't they, at centre back as well at the moment. So.
And Shalaba didn't play particularly well against Burnley as well.
Yep. 4 reasons unknown. Best Arsenal player to bring in for the long term and when. Budget not an issue, but I'd like to avoid Lacazette. I'm looking to move away from 4-3-3. So we've touched on Saka, we've touched on Gabriel, we've touched on Ramsdale. Obviously, probably team dependent, but who would be your best Arsenal player there, Paul?
Team dependent, but one of Ramsdale or Saka, I think.
Okay. Luke NDN just answered Tierney for upside. Gabriel's not been hitting passing, and he went for Martinelli on his second team, which obviously did well on the weekend. Aman Tatler, don't like Wolves. It's time to get rid of Kilman, even though Wolves have single game days. Any players from Newcastle versus Everton penciled in? So we touched that on maybe Kilman to Fraser if he didn't start.
I would
go on.
If Kilman starts, I wouldn't get rid of him.
No, same.
But they've still got they haven't been playing particularly great, but the opposition that Wolves are playing against, Kilman could pick up passing bonus, and or they could keep clean sheets, and they have volume of fixtures over a short period of time. I personally wouldn't move him on. If he gets dropped, I guess for me there'd be an argument of moving on to someone like Ramsey if you were then looking to restructure to
That's
get
a good shout.
5 big at the back or something like that.
An hell of an idea, Paul. That's what I might do. If
I think he'll play. I think he starts. I think he's been one of their best players this season, and he's had a bad last 3 games now. Whether that's circumstantial, if other elements are going on outside of football or not, I don't know. And that might factor in decisions. But
they've still got 3 games pre-overhaul. Obviously, home to Watford on Thursday, which if he does play, could be a brilliant game for him. They're then away to Everton, which is a good fixture. And then home to Leeds, which you could probably argue is probably not a good fixture, probably likely concede and not going to get any passing bonus. Even after that, even after the break, they're home to Villa straight away, and then they play first, as you mentioned, that Wolves Newcastle Friday night game. So there's a lot. He's got a fight. Just for example, he's got a 5-2 over Man City. Just for example, there's a lot of. There's still a lot of upside with Kilman. I think the big thing is
Andy's price. If he was
massive.
like Roman Saiz, it was 7.8 or 7.9. I could understand you wanting to rearrange the budget somehow, but at 6.2 million, provided he plays, I think I'll just hold him till then, and then probably move him on after that. After that Friday night game, I think their fixtures stiffen up quite a bit after that.
I love that Ramsey shout. I love the Ramsey shout for, double up maybe on Villa for a couple of weeks while they've got a lot of very good fixtures, and then you could move off Coutinho then.
And it's not even necessarily the double up, because what you'd be doing is putting your budget holder into midfield.
Yeah.
And then your future transfers, you take out your mid-price midfielders and move to perhaps a Liverpool double up at the back. If you're only sitting with one Chelsea, perhaps that gives you 2 Chelsea, or if you want another City defender later, like back in later down the line.
Love that. Thomas Didymus, how many transfers are too many? Obviously, completely dependent on where you are, and what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. Obviously, Paul's graphic he showed earlier shows you, roughly how many transfers you need to keep ahead of the curve at certain points to have more transfers than game weeks. At this point now, Paul, so let's assume that Thomas is probably maybe slightly behind, because if he was doing really well, he probably wouldn't be asking. But in terms of transfer count now, if you're doing okay, how many transfers would you say are too many?
Feels like an impossible question.
There's so many variables, isn't there?
And if I had that many transfers, I'd be looking at not moving out players that are consistent point streams in my team, but I would do the fixture volume on the explosive players. So take out one explosive player like a Saka, like a Coutinho, like a Rafinha, where the opportunity arises, and then move on to another explosive player, so that you're buying more, like I said earlier on, you're almost buying tickets for the lottery. You've got multiple chances to win, and then daisy chain like that, but then keep my solid players, my Rudiger, my Trent, Kane, Salah in the team, and not try and be too smart with those ones, but move on the players that are unlikely to be captaining but have high ceilings.
Yeah, I like that. I think in terms of maybe trying to answer with a number, I think we're getting, as I say, I usually look at the season in parts, and I think we're coming to the final big transition part of the season now, where a lot of transfers you're making, it coincides that they've got fixture volume now. They're good teams, but they've also got a lot of fixtures left. So maybe Chelsea and Arsenal and Leicester are three teams I'd put in there. I think if you've got more than, maybe 18 transfers left, I would personally say now, if you've got more than 18 left, I think the potential upside of the opportunities that you get later on may now start to dwindle against, you can optimize fixture congestion a little bit earlier, is what I would say.
Remember when we were talking about Monty Hall's theorem,
the goats,
a couple months back, and I was trying to work it didn't tell us what the value of a transfer was, but you and I had something like in the 15 to 20 points is the value of a transfer, but only when you're along the curve.
Exactly.
Think if you're below the curve, the value of a transfer is higher than that, because if you find that a player's out to the rest of the season and you've got limited transfers to do it, then there's obviously bigger value there. Whereas if you're much higher than the curve, in my opinion, the value of a transfer in isolation decreases.
Yes, I completely agree. There's, last year that Man City pile-on has totally made me rethink my transfer strategy in fantasy football across it all, because I used to just try and stick with a really safeguarded 11, a decent 11, and just hop between captains. What I try and do now is, and by doing that, you probably do well covering captaincy days. You get your clean sheet or whatever else. You get your 20 points off whoever it is who keeps a clean sheet. Fair enough. You get your goal. Fair enough. What we saw last year in terms of Man City, and I do appreciate there's a couple of facts to bear in mind. They had an unprecedented set of fixtures. They kept an unprecedented set of clean sheets consecutively. So I do bear that in mind. But if we just use a Chelsea 4-for-1 as an example, if you jump on a Chelsea back five and they keep 3 clean sheets out of 4, you could be looking at 150 points there for 4 or 5 transfers, as opposed to your hour 15 to 20 per week. So I think I'm looking a lot more like that now. This daisy chaining onto blocks and really optimizing fixture congestion for me. It's been hard over the winter because of COVID, right? And that's we were making transfers right at the last minute. But I think we're getting back to normal now. We're not seeing any more postponements. The games, especially once the FA Cup games are done now, we should have quite a clear map through all the way for the rest of the season. And you can really look at these 4-for-1 opportunities and do these little daisy chain sort of pylons to optimize fixtures. But that's definitely a big change I've made this year, across all formats, and it works very well in Telegraph. It works well in Dream Team as well. It works well in Sky. What do you think about that, Paul?
Yeah, I see that as a different tactic to the same problem, that if you're looking to differentiate yourself to increase rank, then that's a viable solution. Whilst there's a bigger risk element, because if the team doesn't keep a clean sheet, then you lose out. But if I was looking to kind of go gung-ho and make an attempt to really climb the ranks, knowing that I accept that I would fall significantly if it didn't pay off, then as I say, I think that's another viable option instead of doing the explosive lottery ticket style moves as I've suggested.
I think you can also do it, in kind of less expansive sort of fashion mind, right? So, looking at fixture volume now, doubling up on Chelsea or tripling up on Chelsea over Man City is probably a very viable sort of tactic. But looking later on, depending how the fixtures fall, just as an example, it may work out at the end due to how they fall that actually Man City end up with 6 or 7 games at the end to Chelsea's, let's say, 5, right? And then you flip it back and you pivot back to, you end up with Cancelo, Laporte, and someone else over that. But it's more the tactic of aggressively targeting high quality. And I must stress this.
Well, you start with 5 points with Chelsea
exactly
defenders as opposed to 2. So.
But yeah, anyway, we'll go off that. Brian asks, what do you think about chaining Brocha onto a Newcastle player? They play Everton and then onto pretty much anything you want. It's a 4 for 5 for 1 with you missing Broja versus Leeds. I haven't really looked at that myself. Paul, do you think that's a good shout? So then,
yeah, I would move off 3 up. I would move off 3 up front anyway. I just don't think that it gives you the flexibility that you would want moving forward. So moving on to a cheaper Newcastle player makes sense to me.
Just looking quickly at the fixtures as well. Southampton's run, congested run of fixtures runs out on Sunday actually, where they play Watford. They have got Leeds in that time, but after that they play Chelsea and Arsenal, which is obviously going to be really tough games. That could be an opportunity there, to maybe move off onto someone else as well. So I'm talking about kind of Ward-Prowse as well there, as well as Broja. Few more questions on Broja. Is it worth biting the bullet on Thursday, transferring him out before he plays to buy a Chelsea defender on the same night? This is off Ron. What do you think about that, Paul?
If it's your only route to a Chelsea defender that you're happy with, then yes. And if you've already got another Chelsea defender, I probably wouldn't. You'd probably bank the transfer.
We've had the question around how many Chelsea defensive assets. This is off Dave. I think he's 5th overall at the moment. How many Chelsea defensive assets?
Yeah, so that's.
Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to. Yeah, that was so that. Sorry, Dave. It was your question that I was trying to answer with the slide earlier on. And
you've answered Tom's question around number of transfers left as well. So kind of 9 or 10 around around the international break looks to be reasonably on par. Yeah, with the amount of fixtures left, which means you can make a positive move every week, can't you? Still. DB, are you concerned by Tielemans' form? Would you look to move him on for Rafinha on Thursday? Also, what do you think of Fraser as an enabler, as a Gallagher replacement?
It's interesting because DB's asked that question, and then somebody asked about targeting a Leicester player to bring in. For me, they'd be more. To me, they'd be more in the sell category than they would be in the buy category just now. And then just look further down the line. I've got concerns about bringing in Leicester players at any point now, even with the fixture volume, because their target to Europe next season might only be through European competition. And therefore, I could see them resting a lot of players in the Prem and playing their strongest team in Europe.
They've got a lot of fixtures at the end and a lot of really good fixtures as well. So
and until I saw the single game day captaincies where I'd be captaining the players, I don't know that I'm earmarking certain players. Like I've got Vardy lined up. It's likely he's only going to play 1 game a week. But if they got further in Europe, I don't know what's your opinion. I think Vardy's more likely to then play the European games than he is to play the Premiership games. If the belief is that their strongest team has Vardy in it.
I think we've seen a bit of a change in Leicester. So I think they've kept back-to-back clean sheets now. We're not saying to go for a Leicester defender. I think we are. We know Leicester can be a very good team, right? We're not talking, about a Brentford here, just as an example. Apologies to Brentford fans. But that run they've got at the end, I think to answer the question, I would hold on to Tielemans. Not because I think he'll do you well now in the immediate 2 weeks, but I think he will do you well later on. And what I think you'll find is you'll transfer him out and then you'll want him back. So that's why I would hold on to Tielemans, because their run is it's a fantastic run of fixtures. They have one of the most left after the international break as well. I take your point fully, Paul, about Europe, but they're not going to put out a bunch of reserves in the Premier League, right? And I personally think we'll all end up with a Leicester player in our team come, April or mid-April. Personally, because I think the volume of fixtures will dictate that.
Are you more a wouldn't buy, wouldn't sell? Then
yes, that's exactly what I do now at the moment. But I think we will all be buying in April.
I think that's fair. If it was my only means to get a Chelsea defender, I think I would perhaps sacrifice them, and with the intention of moving a different player back onto Tielemans later.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I'm assuming limited transfers here, but if you are one of those who've got plenty of transfers and you want to, if it's your only route to Chelsea defender, really, really good point, Paul. But I suppose, overarching point, I think we will want Leicester after, so I maybe try and go a different way. Dav asks, is there a way of logging into the app whilst abroad? We get this, Paul. You've a couple of VPNs, don't you?
Yeah, Tunnel Bear and NordVPN offer 7 or 14-day free trials.
Cool. James Clover says, gents, always a pleasure. Need to bring in a Chelsea defensive asset, but we'll need to lose one or two at Liverpool or Man City.
James Clover has my Hearts calendar that Dan bought me for Secret Santa, a Christmas present. Yeah, brilliant. I think I think he collects football memorabilia for his outhouse or garden pub shed type situation.
I would personally, I'm going Man City. I'm going Laporte. They only play Palace pre-break. I think you made a good point last week, Paul, and I do think this as well, actually. That anything can happen in these breaks as well, right? So who's to say that after the break, everyone who we think, everything's going to be the same as pre-break. Things can happen with COVID, things can happen with injuries. There's going to be some quite intense games, right? There's a lot of World Cup qualifiers. So there's going to be quite a lot of, they're not just knockabout friendlies, right? There's going to be some quite intense matches. So, but, City play once before the break. Liverpool play twice. So I personally think that's your answer. I would just go with the numbers and then reassess after the break. On the Saturday, back Man City away to Burnley, which is obviously a really good game. Liverpool home to Watford, which is probably, arguably a better game. And then they play each other. Liverpool and Man City play each other the week after, whereas Chelsea in that time have got Brentford and Southampton. So I personally would do Man City, but obviously make sure you keep Cancelo, which sure you will. Brian just asks around, is Bowen out for a while? Who's the best replacement? Anything on the airport at the moment? Who's that player? Rudiger. Just go for Rudiger. Okay. Humble Monk says, this is a brilliant resource. It gives me such an advantage in our mini league. Thanks, lads. No worries, Humble Monk. Glad you enjoy. I'm just aware that the Paul's got a meeting in a few minutes. There's me prattling on and rolling over. Just run through my team quickly. So this is my team. I've got Ramsdale in goal, who I brought on the weekend. Cancelo, Trent, Laporte, and Kilman. Gallagher, Coutinho, Ward-Prowse, and Saka. And Salah and Kane. As I mentioned, I'm definitely, I say definitely, obviously depends on starting lineups, but at the moment I am planning Laporte and Gallagher to Rudiger and Thiago Silva, so I've got the exact money for that. How much is Ramsey, Paul? Is he 5.8? I think he is, isn't he? 5.8. If Kilman doesn't start, I could potentially be tempted to also do Kilman to Ramsey, and that would then potentially open up the opportunity to move Coutinho or Ward-Prowse to another heavy-hitting central defender in another week or two. Could even do it on the same night. Oh, I can't make 5 transfers in one night, could I? Oh, no. I wouldn't anyway because they're all playing. I was thinking I could just do all those moves, but I wouldn't. But yeah, that's my team at the moment. 14 transfers left. I will have 12 or 11 after Thursday. But really, I know we say all the time, But formation is everything in this game, and it just makes it so much easier when you've got your formation and your price points in place. You're not using 2 transfers for one move for you. It's such a, we say it all the time, but it is so important. Quick updates on mini leagues. Joseph Finley Bader is 10th in the Hub £500 league. Marius Ionita 9th, Christopher Sharkey 8th, Dean Hicks 7th, Michael Shipley 6th, Jack Smiley 5th, James Ingram 4th, Ryan West 3rd, Maurice Weeks is 2nd, and Liam Stevens 2651, who has jumped up to 2nd overall behind Ream. So very, very well done, Liam, and well done to everyone. Absolutely flying, Liam. Really, really good chance there of a massive finish, and well done to everyone on that list. And the Four Nations League, let's start off. Liam Dorian's first team goes down to 6th. Ian Parrin, transfers in hand. That's what your team name should be, Ian. Have transfers in hand, is up to 5th. Dan Cox slides down. I'm sure you'll be pleased with that, Dan. Down to 2482, down to 4th. And that's because my 2 teams put Saka in on the weekend. So I jump back up above Dan into 2nd and 3rd. Paul, 48-point difference now. You were 65-70 away.
Yeah, I think it was the main difference is Coutinho versus Rafinha, right, over the last week.
Yep. But yeah, I'm starting. Maybe get the feeling starting to. The things I tell you my plans every week, so you know exactly what I'm going to do. So you just plan accordingly. Not that your moves. Yeah. Not that my moves dictate your.
I don't think we're playing in any cash. I don't think we're playing in any cash leagues together as well.
Oh, so. We aren't. We probably are. So. Well, every league I look at, you're top of it, so we probably are. You just don't even know it. But yeah, well done to Paul and Dan. Come on, son. You took over me last week. You need a good week now, Dan. Come on.
What I do like about this is that he's getting the still game gifts going by everyone. I saw others using them in the chains as well. Threads on Twitter.
Get it up, yeah. Brilliant. Paul, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you?
On Twitter at Paul McAnulty 1. It's MCANULTY.
Thank you so much for everyone who has watched us live, and thank you so much for everyone who will watch it back and listen on the podcast version. We really, really hope this helps you dominate your mini leagues. My Twitter handle is at FFH_Fergi. So this podcast and video, we're in the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel, and also available on all major podcast platforms. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button and remember to subscribe in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast versions 5 stars, please, and leave some comments. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are at FFH_HQ, and our podcast Twitter handle is at FFH_Sky. So please follow and feel free to ask any questions. John L says, "Is this the point that Paul says Andrew doesn't know the rules of fantasy football again?" I don't know if you've listened.
Is this teeing you up to the start point? Because before we went on live, I was like, maybe if you ask me that question again, it won't be your skills within fantasy football, but it'll be more your hosting and facilitation skills of not pressing live.
Press the go live button. That's all I need to do. That's my weakness, Paul. Pressing live. I did rag you out a little bit on the Dream Team Tonic pod. If anyone plays the Dream Team, I do mention Paul on there once or twice. Got me going at it, Paul. James, the host, was there when you said it. So he was actually him who brought it up. Our handles on Twitter. I've said that. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football, all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Optastats, top player team reveals, and much, much more. We will be back early next week, looking ahead to the remainder of Game Week 31 and on to Game Week 32, which is the final weekend before the international break, where we could see a crunch tie potentially of Wales versus Scotland if they both win their respective semi-finals.
Ours has been postponed, so I doubt it.
Is it really?
Well, we're playing Ukraine. Do
you know? So I didn't. Do you know what? That completely passed me by. Blimey. Okay. Well, we won't be playing that then. Stay safe, all, and goodbye for now.